a lot of people talk about Vedas as the primary text of Hinduism. Now, what is in the Vedas? Very few people seem to know that. So today's topic is going to be what is the content of the Vedas. Obviously it is a large, enormous topic, but I'm going to condense everything, make it very simple for in just a few minutes. So the content of the Vedas, what do they mean? Why are they important? Why they are called primary texts for Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma? You see, the word Hinduism was actually not something that was mentioned in the Vedas or Upanishads or anywhere. That was just a name given to us, to the Indians, to the Dharma of the land by the foreigners. The invaders, the foreigners, the Greeks, and the people who are used to a certain type of religion, they superimposed those principles upon the Sanatana Dharma and call it Hinduism. So that is a different topic. Now, in this Sanatana Dharma, you have Vedas as the primary text. What are the primary texts? Those are the texts that are immutable. You do not change the content of the text. You just simply understand the knowledge in them, pass from generation to generation. No civilization in the history survived without transmission of knowledge. The word Veda itself comes from the root vid. Vid means gnane, vid gnane, which means knowledge. All surviving, flourishing civilization depend on knowledge. Currently in America, well, I live in America, and it is a knowledge-based civilization or knowledge-based nation. You see so many patents, you see so much knowledge that they hold on to, and using this knowledge, they use it to grow their strength, to grow their power. Similarly, Sanatana Dharma was based on knowledge. It is a knowledge-based civilization. Now that knowledge is preserved in the Vedas. And what is that? What is in that knowledge? What type of knowledge it is? The knowledge, it is divided into two types. One is the knowledge for this worldly transaction, understanding you and your relationship with the Jagat, the world, you and the world, knowledge about you, knowledge about the world, and the relationship between these two. That is one type of knowledge. The second knowledge is the spiritual knowledge, which is who is responsible for these two, the Jagat and the Jiva. Who is responsible for these two? Where do we come from? Where do you go? Where do we go after we leave this body? Who is responsible for this entire playhouse of infinite forms? Like Rabindranath Tagore said, in this playhouse of infinite forms, I have had my play. When he was almost towards the end of his life, he said, in this playhouse of infinite forms, I have had my play. So who is responsible for this playhouse of infinite forms? Is it a thing? Is it energy? Is it a fluke of nature that all this is happening, that you, me, and everything else? So this type of knowledge, this existential queries, this is a different type of inquiry. This is also preserved in our Vedas. So this type of knowledge is what has been preserved from generation to generation, regardless of so many invasions, regardless of destruction and damage to our outward, like temples and monasteries and people, and even a lot of conversions from the Sanatana Dharma into other religions. The reason why we continue, the Sanatana Dharma continued unbroken for thousands of years is because of this knowledge. Now, you may say that we can destroy this knowledge, but the best part of it is this knowledge was for many, many years, for thousands of years, was transmitted from person to person. By listening, the knowledge was preserved through memorization. It was passed on until written documents were invented. And from then, written form of these Vedas, do not simply translate Vedas as scriptures. Scriptures are, it is an import from the Western type of thinking. Vedas are not scriptures. Vedas have knowledge, Vedas have inquiry. For example, in one of the Upanishad, the teacher, the student goes to the teacher and asks the question, Kasminnu bhagavo vignate sarvamidam vignatam bhavati iti, which means that by knowing what, I know everything. And of course, the teacher gives instructions to the student, not simply an answer by saying, oh, there is a God out there, he creates everything. And that is how you and me and everything else came into being. No, that is not how the teacher says. He tells the student, he gives clues to the student to point. It is like pointing towards the truth. It is a truth pointer, the instructions given by this teacher. So the knowledge, Vedas is full of knowledge. What type of knowledge? Now, we talked about two types of knowledge, right? So that is the high point. That is how you have to understand what is in the Vedas. Now, coming back to the more specifics, the structure of the Veda. It has been said that mantra brahmanatmakam Veda, which means Vedas have mantras and brahmanas. Mantra brahmanatmakam Veda. Mantras are the hymns to worship or please deities. Now, there are many interpretations of what these deities are, Mitra, Varuna, Ashwini, Surya, Indra. So, like this, what our ancient rishis did they were called mantra drashtas. The one who can see the mantras. They're not just composing mantras and giving it out to us. They can actually see this, visualize, see in the sense not like an object, but as a, maybe it is an object for them, we don't know. So they were able to visualize. The word see means to visualize that mantra and give it to us. So each mantra is like a mananat trayate iti mantra, means by reciting or by chanting that mantra or the hymn, you are protected. You are protected. So the rishis, the seers, sages recognized, they lived in forest, right? They were forest dwellers for the most part. Although they were living within certain towns and gramas, they were still very much in communion with the forest and nature. So they looked at nature and they said, these different forms of energy that we see, like wind, fire, earth, water, air, all these are different forms of the same energy. One primordial energy taking in different forms and giving us, all these manifestations. And they attributed a particular devata to these energies. And if you give a name and a form to something abstract like wind, air, fire, water, you get Varuna, Mitra, Indra, Vayu, Agni, and so on. And they said, you have to stay in communion with these. And the way to do that is to remember them, is to make sure that you are. It is not like there is a person out there in the sky like Indra and you are pleasing him. It is like you are paying your respects, you are paying your gratitude to that energy, to that type of energy or that form of energy, and saying that, yes, we will live in communion with that energy, with that. Because after all our lives depend on the sun, air, wind, water, earth. Without that, all these panchabhutas, right? Without that, we are nobody. In fact, our body is made up of all those. And when we die, when we leave this body, all this, everything that goes back into nature. Therefore, they say that the sages saw all these things and created certain mantras so that we pay homage to it. We make sure that we are in communion with these energy forms. And that is actually the reason why we have all these mantras. And then there is a concept called yagna. Well, before going into it, let me talk about the rest of the structure of the Veda. So we saw mantra brahmanatmako Veda. Who said this? This was said by the Mimamsakas. Mimamsakas are specialized philosophers, or philosophers who specialized in interpretation of the Vedic knowledge or Vedic literature. So they took this Vedic literature and interpreted in a certain way that remains as a standard. So these philosophers are called Mimamsakas or Purva Mimamsa. There is another called Uttara. Purva means before. Uttara Mimamsa means, see, Mimamsa, the word Mimamsa means critical inquiry. Critical inquiry into what? Into the Vedic injunctions or Vedic hymns or the mantras. So, and there is another Mimamsakas who are called Uttara Mimamsa. Uttara Mimamsakas. They are Vedantins. They are the Vedantins. They are another type of philosophers. Again, rishis, sages, philosophers who talked about the existential questions. Who am I? What is my purpose? Who created? Where do we go from here? All those things. They are the Uttara Mimamsa. They are the next four Uttara Mimamsa or Vedantins. The Purva Mimamsakas defined Vedas as mantra brahmanatmako Veda. Now, mantras are the set of hymns. Brahmanas are another part of the Vedas which give how to do this, how to use these mantras in yajnas. Okay, so this is that. And then as we go further down this classification, we see a transition into this mundane gross utilization of the Vedic knowledge into more spiritual. It goes from material into more subtle, more spiritual. That transition happens in that part of the Vedas called Aranyakas. Aranyakas, the word Aranya means forest. These sages who lived mostly in the forest, wandering, they are the ones who gave us these Aranyakas. Aranyakas talk about the transition from the material world into the spiritual world. And from there, Aranyakas, we enter into the fourth part of the Veda, or the fourth section of the Vedas called Upanishads. Upanishads are the core essence of the spiritual part of the Vedas. So these are the Vedantins. When you talk about Advaita Vedanta, Vishishtadvaita, Dvaita, and so on, there is a touch of Vedanta, or there is interpretation of the Upanishads in it. So we have four parts: mantra, mantra bhaga, brahmana bhaga, aranyaka, and Upanishads. So this is the structure of the Vedas. So now I want to talk about what is the extent of the Vedas. Vedas were divided into, as we know, or most of you know, four types of Vedas. Vedas is Akhanda Gnana Rashi, which means that incredible amount of knowledge bank. It is a knowledge bank. Now, Veda Vyasa, that is why it's called Veda Vyasa. Vyasa, Vyasati means the one who divided, that Rishi who divided this Akhanda Gnana Rashi into four types of Vedas called Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharvana Veda is Veda Vyasa. Now, how much knowledge is in the Vedas? We don't have access to the the Veda Rasi or Akhanda Jnana Rasi that was there thousands of years ago. We have lost so much of our literature, of our knowledge. Patanjali in his Mahabhashya mentions that, see, let me give you this one here. Shakas. Vedas are divided into shakas. Shakas are sections of the Vedas that you take and Yajushaka, in the Yajushaka, there are further divisions. So you take a Shaka and you master it and then pass it on from generation to generation. That is how it works with these Shakas. So Patanjali mentioned in his Mahabhashya, Mahabhashya is a treatise that Patanjali wrote or attributed to Patanjali. In that, he mentions that there are 12 shakas in Rigveda, and there are 101 shakas in Yajurveda, and there are 1,000 shakas in Samaveda, and there are 9 shakas in Atharvana Veda. In total, Patanjali says that there are 1,101 shakas in total, but that is Patanjali. We don't know what was before him, or hundreds or thousands of years before him. So at the time of Patanjali, this is what was available. And according to another treatise called Sarvanu Kramanika, there are 1,137 shakas. And according to Kurma Purana, there are 1,130. And in total, there are, let us say, there are about 1,130 shakas that were mentioned by these various philosophers, sages, and all these people at that time. And of them, we only have 12 shakas available. Imagine of almost 1,200 shakas, only 12 are available. Is it 0.1% of, yes, it is 0.1% is available to us. I think it is 0.1% that is available to us of the existing shakas. And what happened to all these shakas? What happened to all this knowledge? They were destroyed over a period of time. And some of these were not written down. They were just passed on from generation to generation. And therefore, we lost so much of the Veda Rashi. So this is how, this is just a brief introduction of what is Vedas, what is the content of the Vedas, what is the structure of the Vedas. So in the next session video, I will go over, pick up one, for example, Rigveda, and talk about how it is organized. They have mantras and, mantras and suktas and aranyakas and mandalas and so on. We'll talk about that structure in the next video. But till then, till we meet next time, stay healthy and stay safe.